Hey guys, in today's video, I bring you an impressive story that will shake your beliefs. Let's meet Quinton Hawthorne, a man who had a near-death experience and came back with shocking revelations. He's seen celebrities in hell and discovered profound truths about love, forgiveness, and what Jesus really teaches. Get ready because what he witnessed will shake you. Before we start, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell so you don't miss any content like this. Now, get ready for a transformative and surprising journey. My name is Quinton Hawthorne, and I'm about to share with you a story that completely changed my perspective on life, death, and everything in between. Before we dive into the extraordinary events that happened to me, let me tell you a little about who I was before this life-changing experience. I was born and raised in a small town in rural Idaho, where mountains touch the sky and rivers cut through deep valleys. From a young age, I was always fascinated by the wild nature that surrounded me, but at the same time, I maintained an ingrained skepticism about anything that couldn't be explained by science. I was a practical man, with my feet firmly planted on the ground, convinced that life was simply a series of random events, with no greater purpose or hidden meaning. My career as a civil engineer only reinforced this pragmatic view of the world. I dealt with facts, numbers, and laws of physics in my daily life. The idea of something beyond the material plane seemed unlikely to me, if not completely absurd. Spirituality, religion, mystical experiences, all of these were, to me, nothing more than the product of imaginative or easily influenced minds. This was my reality until the fateful day of July 18, 1988. At that time, I was 32 years old and at the height of my career. I decided to take a few days off for a rafting adventure on the South Fork River with my friends Luca, Beth, and Sarah. Little did I know that this trip would not just be a break from routine, but the catalyst for profound personal transformation. I vividly remember the morning we left. The sky was crystal blue, without a single cloud in sight. The fresh mountain air carried the scent of pine trees and the promise of adrenaline. As we prepared our gear, I joked with my friends, lightly mocking the superstitions of Sarah, who insisted on taking her lucky charm, a small crystal that she swore would protect us during the trip. Little did I know that, in a matter of hours, my worldview would be turned upside down. The journey we were about to embark on was not just down the turbulent river, but an odyssey across the frontiers of existence itself. A journey that would take me from the depths of despair to the heights of spiritual ecstasy, forcing me to question everything I believed I knew about reality. It is this extraordinary journey that I want to share with you, a story of life, death, and rebirth. A narrative that defies logic and expands the limits of what we consider possible. Prepare for a journey beyond common understanding. A journey that begins in the choppy waters of the South Fork and extends into the deepest recesses of the human soul. The sun was already out when we finally got into our inflatable boat. The guide gave us the latest safety instructions, emphasizing the importance of following his instructions exactly. I listened with half attention, confident in my previous rafting experience and eager to feel the adrenaline rush through my veins. The first few hours of the trip were exactly what we expected, exciting but manageable. We sailed through the rapids, screaming with excitement with each jump and dive of the boat. Icy water occasionally splashed us, cooling us under the scorching July sun. Luca and I competed to see who could row the hardest, while Beth and Sarah laughed at our childish rivalry. It was after lunch that things started to change. The sky, once so clear, began to close in. Dark clouds gathered on the horizon, quickly advancing towards us. Our guide frowned, clearly worried about the sudden change in weather. He instructed us to row more vigorously, hoping to reach a safe spot before the storm overtook us. But nature had other plans. Within minutes, we were engulfed in torrential rain. The thick drops lashed our skin, making it difficult to keep our eyes open. The river, which was already turbulent, turned into a raging beast. The waters rose and accelerated, tossing our boat as if it were a toy. I could feel the fear rising in my chest, but I refused to show it. Instead, I focused on following our guide's frantic instructions, paddling with all the strength I could muster. The deafening roar of the water almost drowned out their screams. but we could understand enough to keep the boat under some control. It was then that we saw the imminent danger. A huge rock stood in the middle of the river, partially submerged by the turbulent water. Our guide shouted for us to paddle left in a desperate attempt to avoid the collision. For a moment, I thought we could do it. I felt the boat begin to swerve, responding to our frantic efforts. But it was too late. The right side of the boat scraped the rock, with enough force to completely destabilize us. In an instant, we were all in the water. The force of the current immediately separated us, dragging us in different directions. The ice-cold water was a shock to my system. I swallowed several mouthfuls as I struggled to keep my head above the surface. The current dragged me mercilessly, throwing me against submerged rocks and floating logs. Each impact stole a little more of my breath and strength. I could hear distant screams, but I couldn't tell if they were from my friends or just the echo of the water hitting the rocks. Visibility was almost zero due to the constant rain and splashes. I tried to swim toward shore, but it was like fighting an unrelenting force of nature. It was in that moment of desperate struggle that I realized I could die there. The reality of the situation hit me with the same force as turbulent waters. All my previous confidence, all my skepticism, seemed insignificant in the face of the very real possibility of my end. As I continued to be swept downstream, exhausted and almost hopeless, I had no idea that my true journey was about to begin. A journey that would take me far beyond the choppy waters of the South Fork, into a realm I never believed existed. As my struggle against the raging waters dragged on, I felt my strength fading quickly. Each stroke became more difficult than the last, each breath more painful. The intense cold penetrated my bones, numbing my muscles and clouding my thoughts. It was in this moment of extreme exhaustion that something extraordinary happened. Suddenly, all the fighting, all the fear, all the pain, just stopped. It was as if a switch had been turned off. One instant I was fighting desperately for my life. The next I experienced a surreal calm. I realized I was no longer swimming, not even moving. In fact, I no longer felt my body. The sensation was of floating, suspended in a void that, paradoxically, seemed filled with an indescribable presence. The deafening roar of the river was replaced by a deep, welcoming silence. Then I saw my own body below me, still being swept away by the current. The sight should have been shocking, but strangely, I felt no fear or panic. On the contrary, I was overcome by a sense of peace and acceptance that I had never experienced before. I watched with detached curiosity as my physical body was rescued by Luca, who had managed to reach a kayak. I saw his desperate efforts to revive me, his attempts at CPR. Everything seemed to happen in slow motion, as if I were watching a movie. As this was happening, I began to notice a soft light around me. It was not a light that came from a specific direction, but seemed to emanate from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. It was comforting and enticing, like a warm hug on a cold day. I felt myself being gently pulled towards that light. There was no fear. There was no hesitation. On the contrary, there was a growing sense that I was returning home, to a place I had always known but had somehow forgotten. As I walked away from the rescue scene, I realized that I was leaving behind not only my physical body, but also all the worries and limitations of earthly life. My skepticism, my doubts, my fears, they all seemed insignificant and distant now. The transition was smooth, almost imperceptible. One moment I was observing the accident scene from an elevated vantage point. The next I found myself immersed in a completely different environment. It was as if I had passed through an invisible veil, passing from one plane of existence to another. What I found on the other side defied all logic and reason I had cultivated throughout my life. There were no adequate words in my vocabulary to describe what I was experiencing. It was as if all my senses had been magnified and merged into a new form of perception. Colors I had never seen before danced around me. Sounds that could not be heard with physical ears resonated through my being. I felt connected to everything and everyone, part of an infinitely complex and beautiful cosmic tapestry. At that moment, I understood that I was experiencing something beyond life as we know it. It wasn't the end, as I had always feared death would be, but a new beginning. A door had opened, revealing a vast universe of possibilities that I had never imagined existed. And so, free from the constraints of my physical body and the limitations of my earthly mind, I prepared to embark on the most extraordinary part of my journey, a journey that would take me to the depths of my own being and beyond, challenging everything I believed I knew about reality, existence, and the purpose of life. As I absorbed the immensity and beauty of the environment I found myself in, I noticed a presence approaching. It wasn't something I could see with my eyes, but an overwhelming feeling that I was no longer alone. Gradually, this presence took shape before me. The being that manifested was unlike anything I had ever imagined or dreamed of. It did not have a defined physical form as we understand it, but was more like a concentration of light and energy. He emanated an aura of wisdom, power, and above all, unconditional love. Instinctively, I knew I was in the presence of something or someone truly divine. A voice, which was not a voice in the conventional sense, but more like a thought reverberating through my being, addressed me. "Welcome, Quinton. I am Seraphiel." The name resonated with me with a strange familiarity, as if I had always known it but only now remembered it. Seraphiel, a name I had never heard before, but which now seemed to carry a deep and eternal meaning. Where am I? I asked, although not with spoken words, but with my own thoughts. The answer came not in words, but in instant and complete understanding. I was beyond the physical plane, in a realm where time and space did not have the same meaning as they did on Earth. It was a place of transition, reflection, and spiritual growth. Seraphiel began to guide me through this new realm. As we progressed, the environment around us changed and transformed, reflecting the themes of our communication. It was as if the place itself responded to our thoughts and emotions. "You have a lot of questions, Quinton," Seraphiel communicated. "This is the time to seek answers." And indeed, I had countless questions. My entire life of skepticism and doubt seemed to crumble in the face of this new reality. Questions about the existence of God, the purpose of life, the meaning of suffering, they all bubbled through my consciousness. Seraphiel, with infinite patience and compassion, began to approach each of them. But they weren't direct answers in the traditional sense. Instead, each question led to a journey of discovery, where I was guided to find the truth for myself. I learned that God was not the anthropomorphic, judgmental being that many religions portrayed, but a force of unconditional love that permeates all existence. The purpose of life, I discovered, was not to achieve some external goal, but to grow in love and wisdom, expanding our consciousness to become more aligned with this divine force. Suffering, Seraphiel showed me, was not a punishment, but an opportunity for growth and learning. Every challenge we face in our earthly lives serves a greater purpose, helping us develop compassion, strength, and wisdom. During our conversation, which seemed to last for eternities and only an instant at a time, Seraphiel guided me through several dimensions of this spiritual realm. Each of them seemed focused on a different aspect of the soul's existence and growth. In one of these dimensions, I experienced an overwhelming feeling of oneness with the entire universe. I could feel the interconnectedness of all things, from the smallest subatomic particle to the largest galaxies. I understood that the separation we perceive in earthly life is just an illusion. In fact, we are all part of a unified whole. In another, I was confronted with the concepts of time and eternity. I saw that linear time as we know it as just a small part of a much larger reality. Past, present, and future existed simultaneously, and I could glimpse the vastness of existence beyond the limits of a single life. Seraphiel also showed me the power of thought and intention. In this realm, thoughts manifested instantly, creating vivid realities around us. I understood that our minds are much more powerful than we realize, and that our thoughts and beliefs shape not only our experiences, but reality itself. One of the most profound lessons I received was about love. Seraphiel enveloped me in an energy that I can only describe as pure, unconditional love. It was a love so intense and all-encompassing that it made the love I knew on earth seem a pale shadow in comparison. I understood that this love is the fundamental force of the universe, the essence of everything that exists. Love, Seraphiel told me, is not just a feeling, Quinton. It is the very creative force of the universe. It is what connects all souls, what heals all wounds, what transcends all barriers. Learning to living in this love is the true purpose of all existence. As I absorbed these revelations, I felt a transformation occurring within me. My former skepticism completely dissolved, replaced by a deep understanding and unshakable faith. I realized that I had spent most of my life looking at the world through a narrow lens, ignoring the vast and wonderful reality that had always existed beyond my limited perception. Seraphiel, noticing the change in me, said, "You are beginning to awaken to your true nature, Quinton. But your journey is far from over.
There is so much more for you to experience and learn." With these words, I felt like we were about to embark on the next phase of my spiritual journey, a journey that would lead me to confront aspects of myself and existence that I never imagined possible. Little did I know that the most profound and challenging revelations were yet to come.
After my initial encounter with Seraphiel and the accompanying revelations, I was gently guided into what I can only describe as a cosmic projection room. There were no visible walls or projection screen, but I suddenly found myself immersed in a vivid, multidimensional experience of reviewing my life. "Now, Quinton," Seraphiel's voice resonated through my being, "you will have the opportunity to revisit your earthly life, but this time, you will see it not only through your eyes, but also through the eyes of those whose lives you rang." What followed was a deeply moving and, at times, disturbing experience. Scenes from my life began to unfold before me, not in chronological order, but organized by themes and lessons. Each moment was experienced not just as a memory, but as if I were actually there, experiencing it all again with an expanded consciousness. One of the first moments I revisited was when I was just 7 years old. I had taken my younger sister's favorite toy and hid it, simply because I was jealous of the attention she received. At that time, I didn't think much about it. But now, I not only replayed the scene, but felt my sister's pain and confusion. I felt his heartbreak, his sense of betrayal, and the lasting impact that small act of cruelty had on his confidence. Another scene showed me a moment from my teenage years when I made fun of a classmate for his religious beliefs. I prided myself on my rational thinking and considered his faith a weakness. Now, I experienced the event through his eyes. I felt his hurt, his sense of isolation, and how my harsh words made him question not only his faith, but his own worth. But not all scenes were painful. I also experienced moments of kindness and compassion that I had long forgotten. I've seen the positive impact of small acts of kindness, a smile to a stranger, a word of encouragement to a discouraged coworker. I realized how these actions, which seemed insignificant to me at the time, had created waves of positivity that extended far beyond the immediate moment. One of the most powerful experiences was reliving the moment I decided to change careers to become a teacher. I had left a well-paying job in engineering because I felt a calling to make a difference in the lives of young people. Now, I could see the impact of this decision not only on my life, but on the lives of the countless students I came to influence. I saw how my enthusiasm for science inspired some to pursue careers they would never have considered otherwise. I saw how my patience and encouragement helped others overcome their insecurities and reach their potential. As the review progressed, I began to see patterns emerging. I saw how many of my actions were motivated by deeply rooted fears and insecurities. I saw how my skepticism, which I considered a virtue, often served as a barrier, preventing me from experiencing the beauty and mystery of life to its fullest. But I also saw my growth. I saw how, over the years, I learned to be more compassionate, more open, more willing to see beyond appearances. I saw how each challenge, each mistake, each moment of pain had contributed to my development as a human being. Throughout this entire experience, I felt Seraphil's constant, loving presence. There was no judgment, just a deep understanding and a gentle invitation to learn and grow. When the review came to an end, I felt emotionally drained, but also deeply transformed. I had a new appreciation for the interconnectedness of all lives, for the importance of every thought, word, and action. Seraphil then spoke. "You've seen your life through a new perspective, Quinton. What have you learned?" I reflected for a moment before responding. I learned that every moment is precious and loaded with potential. I learned that our actions have an impact far greater than we realize. And I learned that love and compassion are the most powerful forces we possess. Seraphil nodded, a wave of approval and love emanating from her being. "These are valuable lessons, Quinton, but your journey is not over yet. There is more for you to see and experience." With these words, I felt like I was about to embark on the next phase of my spiritual journey, a phase that would take me even deeper into the mysteries of existence and life's purpose. After the intense experience of reviewing my life, I was hoping for a moment of rest, a period to process everything I had learned. But Seraphil had other plans for me. With a gentle gesture, the environment around us changed drastically. The serene light that surrounded us gave way to an oppressive darkness, and I felt a penetrating cold that went beyond the physical. "Quinton," Seraphil's voice rang out, now with a note of seriousness that I had not noticed before. "There are aspects of existence that are difficult to understand, but necessary to be seen. Prepare yourself, for what you are about to testifying can be disturbing." He had barely finished speaking when I found myself transported to a scenario that I can only describe as hellish. It wasn't the hell of medieval paintings, with fire and demons with tridents. It was something much more subtle and therefore much more terrifying. Before me stretched a vast panorama of souls in torment, but it was not an externally imposed torment. Each soul seemed trapped in its own cycle of self-imposed suffering. I saw people reliving their worst moments over and over again, unable to forgive themselves or others. I saw others consumed by hate, fear, or guilt, their negative emotions creating terrible realities around them. The most shocking thing was recognizing familiar faces in this tormented crowd. I saw celebrities who had been adored in life, now trapped in cycles of vanity and self-destruction. I saw powerful leaders tormented by the consequences of their selfish decisions. I saw ordinary people, neighbors, co-workers, casual acquaintances, all trapped in their own mental and emotional prisons. "And what is this place?" I asked Seraphil. My voice, or was it my thoughts, shaking with emotion. "This, Quinton," replied Seraphil in a voice full of compassion, "is what many would call hell. But it is not a place of eternal punishment created by a vengeful deity. It is a state of being, created by the very souls that inhabit." As I absorbed this information, I began to understand more deeply. I realized that each soul there was trapped not by physical chains, but by their own limiting beliefs, by their attachment to negative thought patterns, by their inability to forgive or accept forgiveness. "But why?" I asked, feeling a deep sadness for all those suffering souls. "Why do they remain here?" "Because they haven't learned to free themselves yet," Seraphil explained. "Each of these souls has the power to escape this state at any time. All they need to do is forgive themselves and others, and accept the unconditional love that is always available to them. But the fear, guilt, and the hatred they cultivated in life has become so familiar that it is difficult for them to conceive of a different existence." As we watched, I saw some souls beginning to awaken to this truth. I saw flashes of light emerging here and there as individuals managed to break their cycles of suffering, even if momentarily. It was as if they were remembering their true nature, reconnecting with the source of love that Seraphil had shown me earlier. "You see, Quinton," Seraphil continued, "there is no eternal damnation. There are only choices we make every moment, whether in earthly life or beyond. Choices of love or fear, of forgiveness or resentment, of growth or stagnation." This revelation hit me deeply. I realized how much time I myself had spent in my earthly life trapped in negative thought patterns, in judgments, in unfounded fears. I saw how easily I could have become one of these tormented souls if it weren't for the opportunity for transformation I was now experiencing. "And what's the point of showing me this?" I asked, still shaken by the intensity of the experience. "So that you understand the importance of your choices, Quinton," Seraphiel replied. "And so that you may see the transformative power of love and forgiveness, and so that when you return, you can help others avoid this fate." As Seraphiel spoke, I felt a wave of determination rise within me. I wanted to help. I wanted to be a beacon of hope for those who were lost in the darkness of their own fears and judgments. Slowly, the vision of hell began to dissipate, but the lessons I learned there remained vivid in my consciousness. I knew I would never see life the same way again. Every choice, every thought, every action now carried new weight and meaning. As we returned to the serene light that had characterized our previous interactions, I felt changed. The experience had been painful, but also deeply enlightening. I was eager to see what more Seraphiel had to show me, knowing that each new revelation brought me closer to a deeper understanding of the true nature of existence. After the intense and disturbing vision of hell, I felt a deep need for understanding and comfort. As if responding to my unspoken thoughts, Seraphiel guided me to a new environment. This time, we found ourselves in a space that seemed infinite, dotted with countless points of light, like stars on a clear night. "What do you see, Quinton?" Seraphiel asked, her voice echoing across the expanse. "Stars," I responded instinctively. "Millions and millions of stars. Look closer," Seraphiel instructed gently. I concentrated, and as I did so, I realized that each point of light was not a star, but a life, or more accurately, many interconnected lives. Each light represented a soul, and emanating from each of them were countless threads of light, connecting it to other souls. "What you are seeing," Seraphiel explained, "is a visual representation of the concept of reincarnation and the connections between souls over multiple lifetimes." I was astonished. The beauty and complexity of what I was seeing was overwhelming. Each soul seemed to have its own story, its own journey, but they were all intrinsically connected in a cosmic web of shared experiences. Seraphiel continued, "Reincarnation, Quinton, is not a simple linear process as many on Earth believe. It is not a progression from one life to another in an orderly sequence. It is a multidimensional phenomenon, where each soul experiences multiple lives simultaneously on different planes of existence." As he spoke, I saw how some of the points of light pulsed more intensely than others. Seraphiel explained that these were souls currently incarnated on physical planes, such as Earth. "But why?" I asked, still trying to take in the vastness of what I was seeing. "What is the purpose of all these lives, all these experiences?" "Growth," replied Seraphiel. "Evolution of consciousness. Each life offers unique opportunities for learning and development. Souls choose to incarnate in different circumstances to experience different aspects of existence, to learn specific lessons, and to balance karma accumulated in other lives." As Seraphiel spoke, I began to see my own star in the midst of that vast ocean of light. I was surprised to see how many connections she had with other souls. Some of these connections were bright and strong. Others were more faint. Some seemed strained or tangled. "These are your karmic relationships," Seraphiel explained. "Souls with whom you have shared experiences over many lifetimes. Some are what you would call soulmates or spiritual family members. Others are souls with whom you have unresolved conflicts or outstanding lessons." I watched with fascination as some of these connections changed and transformed before my eyes. Seraphiel explained that this represented the constant evolution of karmic relationships as souls interact and learn from each other. "But what about free will?" I asked, a little worried about the apparent predestination of it all. Seraphiel smiled, or at least that was the feeling I got. "Free will is fundamental, Quinton. Before each incarnation, the soul, in conjunction with its spirit guides, plans the key lessons and experiences it wishes to have. But once incarnated, the soul has the freedom to make its own choices within. This is why some lives seem more challenging than others, its soul seeking accelerated growth through intense experiences. As I absorbed these revelations, I began to see my own life in a new light. Moments that seemed like random coincidences now revealed themselves as carefully orchestrated encounters. Challenges that seemed unfair or cruel turned out to be opportunities for growth that I had chosen for myself. "What about Jesus?" I asked, remembering the religious beliefs I had rejected in life. "What is his role in all of this?" "Jesus," Seraphiel responded reverently, "is a highly evolved being of light who chose to incarnate on earth to bring a message of unconditional love and forgiveness. His mission was and continues to be to help souls reconnect with their true divine nature," Seraphiel continued. "The love that Jesus taught and demonstrated is the key to spiritual evolution. It is through love, for self, for others, and for all creation, that souls break free from karmic cycles and ascend to higher levels of conscience." This revelation touched me deeply. I realized that in my skepticism I had rejected not only religious dogma, but also profound spiritual truths that could have enriched my life. "Remember, Quinton," Seraphiel concluded, "each soul's journey is unique. There is no right or wrong path, only experiences and the growth that results from them. Reincarnation offers endless opportunities to learn, grow, and ultimately return to the source of all love and consciousness." As I contemplated these truths, I felt a deep gratitude for this experience. I understood that I was being presented with knowledge that few have the opportunity to obtain during an earthly life. At the same time, I felt an immense responsibility. What would I do with this knowledge when, and if, I returned? Before I could voice this question, Seraphiel, as always in tune with my thoughts, said, "There is more for you to see and experience on Quinton. Your journey is not over yet." With these words, I felt we were about to move into the next phase of this extraordinary spiritual odyssey. Little did I know that the most profound and transformative revelations were yet to come. After the revelations about reincarnation, I felt that my mind was filled with new perspectives and understandings. However, Seraphiel seemed to know that there was something even more fundamental for me to experience. With a gentle gesture, the vast field of reincarnating souls disappeared, and we found ourselves in a space that I can only describe as pure love. It was not a place in the physical sense, nor even in the ethereal sense that I had experienced until then. It was a state of being, a frequency of existence that transcended any concept of space or time. "Quinton," Seraphiel's voice resonated through my being. "What you are about to experience is the essence of all existence. It is what some traditions call God, others the source, and still others universal consciousness. Get ready." He had barely finished speaking when I was enveloped by a wave of love so intense, so pure and unconditional, that I felt as if every atom of my being was being dissolved and recreated simultaneously. It was a love that went beyond anything I had ever experienced or even imagined possible. At that moment, I was love. There was no separation between me and this cosmic force of compassion and total acceptance. I could feel how this love permeated all existence, connecting everything and everyone. It was the force that held atoms together, that made the stars shine, that gave life to every being on every plane of existence. Through this experience, I understood profound truths that went beyond words. I understood that this unconditional love is always present, always available. It is the very substance of the universe, the fabric of reality. Our inability to constantly feel it in our earthly lives is simply a result of our own mental and emotional barriers. I realized that all the suffering, all the pain, all the fear we experience in life is ultimately a result of our perceived separation from that love. When we feel disconnected from this source, we create realities based on fear, judgment, and scarcity. I saw how every soul, no matter how lost or tormented it may seem, is, at its core, made of that same pure love. The most terrible actions, the darkest thoughts, are just distorted expressions of a desperate search for reconnection with that source of love. I understood that the ultimate purpose of all existence, of all spiritual evolution, is to return to full awareness of this love. Every life, every experience, every challenge is an opportunity to remember and more fully express our true loving nature. As I was immersed in this state of spiritual ecstasy, I felt Seraphiel communicate. This is the love that Jesus taught, Quinton. It is the love that all the great spiritual masters have tried to describe. It is the love that heals all wounds, that transcends all judgment, who redeems every soul. In that moment, I completely understood what it meant to love your neighbor as yourself. It was not a moral commandment, but a description of the fundamental reality of the universe. At the deepest level, there is no self and other. We are all individualized expressions of this one source of love. As I slowly returned to a more individualized state of consciousness, I brought with me an understanding that I knew would forever change the way I saw the world and interacted with others. Seraphiel, sensing the depth of my transformation, said softly, "Always remember this experience, Quinton. In the darkest of times, when the world seems dark and hopeless, remember that this love is always there, always accessible. Your task, if you choose to accept it, is to be a conduit of this love in the world." I nodded, feeling the weight and joy of this responsibility. He knew that if he returned to earthly life, nothing would be the same as before. Every interaction, every decision, every moment would be an opportunity to manifest that unconditional love that I now knew to be the true nature of all existence. But my journey was not over yet. Seraphiel had more to show me, more lessons to teach me, and I was eager to learn, to grow, to become a more perfect vessel for this divine love I had experienced. After the overwhelming experience of unconditional love, I felt completely transformed. It was as if every part of my being had been recalibrated to a higher frequency of existence. However, as I slowly returned to a more individualized state of consciousness, I began to feel a growing tension within myself. Seraphiel, always in tune with my internal state, noticed my restlessness. "What are you feeling, Quinton?" he asked softly. I took a moment to collect my thoughts before responding. I don't know if I want to go back," I finally confessed. "How can I return to earthly life after having experienced all this? How can I return to a world of limitations, of pain, of separation, after having known the truth of unconditional love and the unity of all existence?" Seraphiel nodded understandingly. "This is a dilemma that many souls face after experiences like yours, Quinton. It is natural to feel reluctant to leave this state of grace and harmony. However, the choice of whether or not to return is yours and yours alone." As he spoke, I realized we were in a new environment. It was a peaceful, serene space, reminiscent of a beautiful earthly garden, but with an ethereal quality that distinguished it from any physical place I had ever seen. "This is a place of contemplation and decision," Seraphiel explained. "Here, you will have the opportunity to reflect on everything you have experienced and decide the next step in your spiritual journey." I sat, or had the feeling of sitting, on a nearby stone bench, feeling the weight of the decision that lay ahead of me. On the one hand, the idea of returning to earthly life, with all its limitations and challenges, seemed almost unbearable after the transcendent experiences I had lived. On the other hand, I felt a growing responsibility to share what I had learned, to be an agent of love and transformation in the world. "If I choose to stay," I asked Seraphiel, "what will happen?" "If you choose not to return," Seraphiel replied gently, "your journey will continue here in the spiritual realm. You will have the opportunity to continue your growth and evolution, to help other souls on their journeys, and to prepare for future incarnations, if you so choose. What if I return? If you decide to return, you will take with you the lessons you learned here. Although the specific memories of this experience may become hazy, the physical brain has difficulty processing transcendent experiences. The essence of what you experienced will remain with you. You will have the opportunity to apply this knowledge in your life, of being a beacon of light for others, of making a difference in the world in a way that only someone who has gone through this experience can do. I thought deeply about these options. Part of me longed to remain in this state of grace and harmony. The thought of leaving behind the peace and love he had experienced was painful. Yet another part of me felt a calling, a responsibility to return and share what I had learned. "There is something else you should consider, Quinton," Seraphiel added. "If you choose not to return now, the challenges and lessons your current life offers will have to be faced in a future incarnation. There is no way to avoid growth, only to delay." This information gave me pause. I realized that although the idea of returning was challenging, it also offered a unique opportunity. I could face my life's challenges with a new perspective, with a deeper understanding of the purpose behind each experience. Additionally, I thought about my loved ones, my family, my friends, my students. I realized I had a chance to positively impact their lives in a way that wouldn't have been possible if I chose to stay. After what seemed like an eternity of contemplation, I came to a decision. I looked at Seraphiel and said, "I want to go back. I know it will be hard. I know there will be times when I feel lost and disconnected. But I also know I have the opportunity to make a difference, to be a conduit for the love I have experienced here. I can't waste this chance." Seraphiel smiled, or at least that was the feeling I got. "A brave decision, Quinton. Remember, although the path may be challenging, you will never truly be alone. The love you have experienced here is always present, always accessible. You just need to open yourself to receive it." I nodded, feeling a mixture of apprehension and determination. "How do I get back?" I asked. "Close your eyes," Seraphiel instructed, "and focus on the sensation of your physical body. Remember the sensation of breathing, the weight of your body, the beat of your heart." I did as he directed, and gradually I began to feel a pull, as if I was being pulled back towards something. "Remember, Quinton," Seraphiel's voice sounded increasingly distant, "you came here to remember who you really are. Now, go and live that truth." With those words, I felt a sudden acceleration, and then I opened my eyes with a start, breathless and disoriented. The first thing I registered was the pain. My whole body ached, and my lungs burned with every breath. Then I heard voices around me, excited and relieved. "He's breathing. He's back." I recognized the voice of Luca, my friend who had rescued me from the river. Gradually, my vision came into focus, and I saw familiar faces looking at me with concern and relief. Luca, Beth, Sarah, and some paramedics who had arrived to provide aid. I tried to speak, but my throat felt raw and sore. One of the paramedics gently stopped me from moving. "Be quiet, sir," he said. "You've been through a traumatic experience. We need to get you to the hospital for tests." As I was prepared for transport, flashbacks of my experience began to appear in my mind. The fight in the river, the encounter with Seraphiel, the revelations about life and death, the unconditional love I had experienced. Everything felt so vivid and yet so distant, like a dream from which I was slowly waking up. At the hospital, I underwent a series of tests and was diagnosed with hypothermia and almost drowning. The doctors were surprised by my quick recovery, commenting that I had been very lucky. Luck. I smiled internally upon hearing that word. I knew that what I had experienced went far beyond luck. It had been a journey of profound transformation, an opportunity to glimpse the true nature of reality. In the days and weeks that followed, as I recovered physically, I struggled to integrate my experience into my everyday life. The specific memories of my spiritual journey began to become hazy, just as Seraphiel had predicted. Yet the essence of what I learned stayed with me, shaping my perspective and actions in profound ways. I started to see the world with new eyes. Every interaction, every challenge, every moment of joy or sadness was an opportunity to practice the unconditional love I had experienced. I realized that my mission was not to convert others to my new worldview, but simply to live the truths I had learned, being an example of compassion, forgiveness, and love. My relationship with spirituality has changed drastically. I abandoned my former inflexible skepticism and opened myself to the possibility of mystery and the divine in everyday life. I began meditating regularly, seeking to reconnect with that sense of unity and love I had experienced. My career as a teacher took on a new meaning. I realized that I had a unique opportunity to positively impact the lives of my students, not only academically, but also spiritually. Without imposing my beliefs, I began incorporating lessons about empathy, compassion, and interconnection into my classes. Of course, not everything was easy. There were moments of doubt, moments when everyday reality seemed to contradict everything I had learned. There were days when I felt disconnected, lost, longing for the clarity and peace I had experienced during my spiritual journey. But in those moments, I remembered Seraphiel's words. The love I had experienced was always there, always accessible. It was just a matter of opening myself to receive it. And so, even on the hardest days, I struggled to keep my heart open, to see beyond appearances and connect with the divine essence in each person and in each situation. Over time, I began to share my story with others. At first, just with close friends and family, then in support groups for people who had had near-death experiences. I found that my story resonated with many, offering hope and a new perspective on life and death. Today, years after that fateful day on the South Fork River, I continue my journey of growth and learning. I know I still have a lot to learn, a lot to evolve. But I carry with me the deep certainty that we are all part of something bigger, all connected by a love that transcends our earthly understanding. My name is Quinton Hawthorne, and this is my story. A story of death and rebirth, of fear and love, of separation and unity. It's a story that continues to unfold every day, every breath, every moment of choosing between fear and love. And for you, who have read this far, I leave an invitation. Look beyond appearances. Open your heart to the love that permeates all existence. Because in the end, that's what really matters. This is who we are, at the deepest level of our being. Unconditional, pure, and eternal love. If you like this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment on your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.